Hi, hello, good evening. What is going on, everybody? It is this week's episode of The Walkthrough. I am your host, Joe Macheca. Three big things for tonight as we roll into this week's episode. The number two overall seed, number one overall in my heart, South Carolina women's basketball received their tournament fate. Where they will be playing is obviously starting the season off at home at Colonial Life Arena. We'll have a quick Selection Sunday recap. Before we get into our big interview tonight, we have Brad Muller, the voice of Gamecock women's basketball. So full interview with Brad Muller, the man, the myth, the legend, as well coming at you. And then we will also do a baseball wrap up right after that. So be sure to check all of that out. All of that coming at you live right after the intro. This is the walkthrough. Stay locked in. Coming at you right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for this week's episode of The Walkthrough, presented by the Chief Sports Network. And now, here's your host, Joe Macheca.
Oh, yes, indeed. It is that time of the week. It is this week's episode of The Walkthrough. Once again, I am your host, Joe Macheca, back at it once again. Again, recapping Selection Sunday. South Carolina women's basketball named the number two overall seed. They still are getting one seed privileges. A lot of people, I guess, surrounding this program were unhappy that they weren't the number one overall seed, and deservedly so. I think when you lead the country in quad one wins and your schedule is as much of a gauntlet as Dawn Staley made it out to be, I think you deserve at the very least a little credit. When looking at the one seed, I'm pulling the bracket up now, as you can see where South Carolina sits in that, and then also it's a familiar bracket as well, familiar pull. But again, South Carolina taking on Tennessee Tech 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon. So full coverage, obviously, for that. On the big spur.com, I will have all of that for you, coming up. So stay tuned for that. But, pretty favorable 16-team little draw here for South Carolina. If you think about it, I mean, and I've said 8 teams they have seen within the past 2 seasons. You look at Utah, Indiana, either of those two programs South Carolina saw last season. Alabama, South Carolina knows all too well from this year. Maryland, South Carolina saw last season as well. West Virginia, I believe they did not see North Carolina. They saw Vanderbilt and Oregon, or Vanderbilt's another team they saw. I believe that they matched up with Oregon, and then Duke. So you've got 8 teams in your in your regional, I guess, that you've seen within the past 2 seasons, right? So that's huge. South Carolina certainly, unhappy they didn't get the number one overall seed, but again, you do get, number one overall seed. You're playing in Birmingham, which is, again, you're the closest team to their regional site. Again, when you think about it, Texas is going to be far away from Birmingham, and then also Southern Cal and UCLA are both pretty far away from Spokane. So I think if you're South Carolina, you like this draw. You're pissed that you weren't the number one overall seed, but again, it's and play into it if you will, right? Like if it's going to motivate you, it's going to motivate you. If not, it's not. Pick one and go for it. I think this team is locked in, rare and ready to go. And again, I talked to Brad Muller, quite a bit about that this morning, and we'll get into that interview in a second. But again, just wanted to wrap up signing day, takeaways and thoughts. I mean, again, South Carolina blessed with the 2 day or the extra day of rest. Again, not having to play on Thursday and Saturday, and playing on Friday and Sunday. It's the exact matchup that you want. And again, you're going to have to see until you get to the Final Four. You're going to see teams that you have matched up with. So. Certainly, again, working out in the Gamecocks' favor. Certainly, if you can be lucky to not be named the number one overall seed, I think this team was for sure, based on their draw. So, again, good things for South Carolina women's basketball on Selection Sunday. Okay, so getting into my main interview tonight, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Brad Muller. He joined me earlier for an interview real quick. So, going to get to that, and then afterwards we'll hit a commercial and break down some baseball. Episode of the walkthrough. Again, I'm your host, Joe Macheca. With me is this week's guest, one of my favorite recurring guests, again, here to talk shop about women's basketball, the hardest working man in play-by-play, the one, the only Brad Muller. Mr. Muller, how are we doing this fine Tuesday morning, I guess about to be afternoon?
Yeah, it's been great. No game today, but looking forward to the weekend to get things started with March Madness.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the best time of year. Again, with March, South Carolina women's basketball sweeping their SEC tournament out in Greenville. I guess we'll start with that before we get to the Selection Sunday, instant reactions and stuff like that before we look ahead to everything that this tournament is in store for. But again, South Carolina sweeping the SEC tournament, looking good, and continuing to play their best basketball through, the SEC, their third straight SEC tournament title.
Yeah, you're just hoping they're going to be able to pick up where they left off. Sometimes that's the downside of having 2 weeks between the conference tournament and the NCAA tournament. When you're playing that well, you kind of want to, get right back out there because I think from an offensive standpoint, especially the last two games against Oklahoma and Texas, you saw some dominance in the paint that you really hadn't seen consistently all year. And that's really what you were hoping to see. And you hope that carries over to the NCAA tournament. Obviously Chloe Kitts, the SEC tournament MVP, was fantastic. And so was Sanaya Fagan. The defense was locked in, especially in those last two games against very good post players from Oklahoma and Texas, some different All-American players. And, so on both sides of the court, you really liked what you were seeing down low from the Gamecocks, and you just want to see that carry over into mid-March and late March as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, kind of getting into Selection Sunday, part of, the reason South Carolina and a lot of people were upset, were the fact that South Carolina played so well in the SEC tournament. You finished with 16 quad one wins going into the Selection Sunday, but you didn't get the number one overall seed. This team and Dawn Staley were kind of, we're bummed they didn't get it, but they're not going to let it motivate them. They're not going to, get sidetracked from some of their goals, but, certainly, a feeling amongst the fans in this fan base and in this program that a lot felt like they should have gotten the number one overall seed.
Yeah. And, I think Coach Staley's rationale is perfectly valid because she put together a ridiculously difficult schedule. In addition to the SEC on the women's side being perhaps the best it's ever been in terms of top to bottom, where throughout the season you were having anywhere between 7, 8, or 9 ranked teams at one time, and you had to play that brutal schedule. And then, with what they did in the non-conference schedule, you look at the teams ranked in the top 10 right now, and Carolina played pretty much all of them, and beat most of them. And their only losses were to teams that are in the top 5. And a lot of those are non-conference. I mean, yeah, they played more ranked teams than anybody. They beat more ranked teams than anybody. So you would think that would count a little bit more. But at the same token, I heard the explanation from a committee member that, okay, when all things were, things weren't technically equal, but somewhat close. They said, well, UCLA beat them handily, so we're giving them the nod. Well, okay, I don't have a huge problem with that, but I also understand Coach Staley's feeling like, hey, if we put together this ridiculously difficult schedule and people are getting credit for beating us, such as UConn, because UConn's a very good team, their resume isn't very good because their conference isn't very good. So their best games are out of conference, and they did. They whooped Carolina here at home, so they should get credit for that. They lost to Tennessee on the road, but they don't have a lot after that in terms of strength of schedule. So if you're rewarding a team for, beating somebody like they should, then South Carolina should be credit for being that team that everyone's giving credit to. So it's circular logic, but you're the number 2 overall seed. It's not that big of a difference. That I think the bracket is fine with how it landed for them.
Yeah.
If they were the the fourth number one seed, I'd be really upset about it. But, I can see how you can argue it both ways. So I'm not too concerned with them. And if that gives them a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, fine. But I think all coaches like having that little bit of motivation.
Yeah, Brad, the logic behind it certainly doesn't make sense, right? You add, the strength of schedule factor to teams that, don't necessarily have the strength of schedule, edge over, again, in South Carolina. And South Carolina being the one brand that it doesn't apply to makes zero sense. It's not circular thinking. It's dead end thinking, I guess, up there, for the, tournament logic. But, I think one thing about this draw that's exciting and enticing is that they've seen a lot of these teams right before. Their 2 seed is a team they've seen before, and I mean, if they look at potentially their second round game, and not to overlook Tennessee Tech at all, but their potential second round game is between Indiana and
Utah. Yep.
Utah, Indiana, 2 teams that they saw last season, right?
Yep.
So again, this team, they're prepared for whatever. And after seeing UConn and Notre Dame be 2 and 3 seeds, I think they are, licking their chops at what their side of the bracket holds.
Yeah, it's fine. And, the first, obviously South Carolina should get past the first round. No disrespect to Tennessee Tech, especially because I have a friend who's the associate head coach there. Yeah. But you get to the second round, and the second round will be an intriguing matchup with Utah and Indiana, teams that again they did see last year, and they're both very similar in that they like to get up and down the floor, and they shoot a ton of threes. So whoever you get, Utah or Indiana, you're going to see a lot of threes go up. So that's going to be fun. Indiana, remember, gave the Gamecocks a run for their money last year in the Sweet 16. Gamecocks had like a 20-point lead, but they shot like 55% in the second half and, cut it down, I think, to a 1-possession game before Raven hit a late 3 and the Gamecocks, kind of got by. That's all you got to do is survive in advance. But Indiana gave us all we could handle last year, so certainly wouldn't overlook them. And then, on the other side, if the seeding holds, you could eventually get to a Duke team that you played and handled this year. And you get this time of year, it's all about matchups. And, when you look at teams 1 through 10 in the national rankings, unlike a lot of years where you kind of know who the top 3 teams are, at least this year, I'm not really sure because every team has been vulnerable at some time this year, including South Carolina, where it's very common to have mostly 1s and 2s in the Final Four. I'm not going to be terribly surprised this year if a 1 seed goes out a little bit earlier, say around the Sweet 16, something like that. And it's just on matchups. The teams 1 through 10, maybe 1 through 11, you throw Kentucky in there. There's some really good teams out there with the talent spread out, which is good for women's college basketball. You're not at the point where you are with the men's side where, you might get a 10 seed into the Elite 8 or something like that. But when you look at the teams that are ranked 1 through 11 or 12, there's some really good teams there. And you just have to look at the matchups, like for South Carolina, where they've struggled this year on the road at Texas because of their bigs, and at UCLA because their bigs and their depth in the bigs. Okay, you don't want to see a team like that maybe too really late. If it's a team that's more guard oriented, you think, okay, maybe we've got more of a chance. That's more of in our wheelhouse defensively. So at this point, it's all about matchups, and that's what it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the forwards have been leading, this team through conference play. Sanaya Fagan's been wonderful. I mean, and we saw Chloe Kitts, almost, I think it was unanimous or it was close. It was darn close for Chloe, in Greenville last weekend, 2 weekends ago. So yeah, it's big. Forward play has been big. And, circling into kind of my next question here, forward play has always been huge for Dawn Staley's teams, especially when they go all the way. I did want to ask you, kind of how this team, stacks up to other teams, of past. Where does this team rank? I know, we've certainly seen the highs and the lows of this squad this season with the 3 losses, and then also getting blown out at home by UConn. But also, some big wins in the toughest schedule. Where do they stack up from a lot of teams that you've seen play before you?
It's hard because, as we said a moment ago, I think the depth of talent around the country is better than it's ever been. In terms of, in years past, again, you knew who the top 3 or 4 teams were for the most part. And so you kind of knew what you're getting into. This year, South Carolina is really, really good, obviously, but with the talent being more spread out, it's tougher to say, yeah, pencil them in for the Final Four because, there's just a lot of really good basketball teams. If you're comparing them to other South Carolina teams, prior to the SEC tournament, you'd say, okay, well, maybe they're not as good in the post because let's look at the standard we've set the last 10 years. It starts with, I guess, really Elena Coates, right? She comes in, and then you get Asia Wilson coming in, and their careers overlap for a few years. And you had these two All-Americans in the post, which was ridiculous. All right. And then you had Asia Wilson 1 year by herself once Elena graduated after the first national championship. And then you come in, you get an Aaliyah Boston for 4 years. And then you overlap that a few years with Camila Cardoso. So you have two All-Americans, and then you've got Camilla by herself, who was pretty darn good as well, last year. And so this is the first year that South Carolina hasn't had an All-American in the post in about a decade. So it's been a little bit more of a struggle, on both ends of the floor. You don't have that huge 6'5", 6'7" dominating presence like you've had for the last 10 years. But what's encouraging is what you saw again on both ends of the floor in the SEC tournament, with Kitts, who plays the 4, and Fagan, who plays the 5. I mean, offensively, they were both ridiculously efficient in the SEC tournament. In the 3 games, I think Kitts shot 74% from the floor. Fagan shot 75%. You got to love that. We can get the ball to them. And it wasn't just, shooting layups from 2 feet. They were hitting their mid-range. And if they can keep doing that, that opens things up for the guards. And that's the way it's been the last 10 years. So you want to win a championship, you have to have good post play. Because one, it's a lot easier to score from 4 feet than it is from 20 feet, but also it just opens things up for your guards. So your good 3-point shooters can get good open looks at the basket. And when players like Fagan and Kitts are playing well, it opens things up for everybody else. And last but not least, you have to mention what Fagan was doing defensively in those games against Oklahoma and Texas against those bigs. If she can D up like that against those bigs, South Carolina has a chance to make a great run.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with Chloe. Essentially a sophomore playing like a senior. I talk about this all the time on this program, and we've talked about it every time you've gotten on the show. Really, really playing above her age and her basketball experience. And also going to get to the second half of this Brad Muller interview here in a second, but I do have one quick ad for you to read real quick before we get into, again, the second half of my interview with Brad Muller. This is for our March Madness Bracket Challenge. Gamecock fans, head to ErnieSportsMedia.com. That is Ernie.com/homepage. Again, I've got this pulled up here. So Ernie.com. Again, to enter our Inside the Gamecocks /Big Spur All-Gamecocks March Madness Challenge from our partners at Ernie Sports. Win $5,000 cash if you have the best bracket in the country, plus other team and individual prizes within Gamecock Nation. Go to Ernie.com. That is Ernie.com, as you can see on the screen right now. To register, it is free. Enter the March Madness Tourney on the homepage and select South Carolina Gamecocks as your team. Fill out your brackets by Thursday. Sit back and win. If the Gamecocks have the best showing in the contest, South Carolina wins the 2025 Ernie Cup and a celebration to follow with everyone invited. So spread the word. And once again, here is the second half of Brad Muller, again, presented by the Ernie Tournament March Madness Tournament Challenge. Go to Ernie.com and sign up, register your bracket under South Carolina. Now, here's more of Brad Muller. Tends to play more true to the 3 position rather than the 4 or the 5. So she's been able to get in the post, get rebounds. Even when she's getting out rebounded, she's still getting physical baskets right on the offensive end. And it's huge. And, I'm excited to see what Molly Benetti can do with her this summer, again, as she continues to grow and continues to find that sweet spot between, enough muscle to contend in the post, but also to be able to do what you want to do on the outside, and kind of getting into that from the outside. Somebody we talked about being able to shoot from the outside from the jump. Somebody that we've talked about. I think the first time I had you on this show, we were talking about Miriam Dowda. She had a huge game against Oklahoma, in the SEC tournament again. And then we kind of saw the team kind of rally behind that going into the second half. Everyone One of the biggest things for me on this show is that this team does well when everybody is stepping up. So Dowda stepped up and everyone else stepped up around her. So that's big, again, continuing the depth in the post. And we'll get to Joyce here in a second as well. But
yeah, you got to have that too. You have to have that depth. And it was nice to see Dowda kind of have some breakout games. And it wasn't so much huge numbers offensively. It was what she was doing defensively, spelling Fagan, basically, where she would come in and use her size to alter shots, prevent shots, she get her arms up, grabbing rebounds, and also playing great defense against, some All-American post players. And, that's been something that's been missing, for a lot of the year against those big posts. And she really stepped things up. She was, known more as a perimeter shooter as opposed to at Arkansas, but to show that she can play that kind of defense, grab boards and hold her own against, these terrific post players they're going up against is a huge lift for South Carolina, and you hope that continues, and hope it carries over for her offensively as well to see a few shots go down. But they're not asking a ton out of her. It's only a few minutes a game, but they're important minutes to spell the post players that are usually in front of her that do more of the scoring. But if she can continue to give those quality minutes and prevent the other bigs from scoring, that's huge. That's a huge point swing. And it was a big part of why the Gamecocks were so successful in the SEC tournament.
Most definitely. And after that game, Dawn had mentioned, she's like, it's big because, Miriam is going to do bigger things. Like, we're going to see the most out of her next season. Right. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that, especially off the bench. South Carolina is the nation's best bench in the country, in large part because of Joyce Edwards and Mylasia Fulwiley. We'll get to Fulwiley. We'll kind of wrap, this championship DNA point up with her. But, moseying on over to Edwards, the true freshman's been great. Took her a couple games to adjust, in the SEC tournament, but was finally able to put up a 20-point outing on the big stage. She continues to get better as things roll along here too.
Yeah, she's been fun to watch. And, throughout the season, you could see early in the season where, the game was moving fast for her as athletic as she is and all the things that she can do. It was just moving fast. And then you get into SEC play and you started seeing things slow down for her, where she's making shots, finishing shots, grabbing some rebounds and running the floor. She can run the floor pretty well when they get out in transition. So you certainly want to see more of that. And the most important thing for Joyce when she's successful is when she's making the easy ones, when she can get an offensive rebound, get a stick back and hit those 4-foot shots. I mean, she can shoot a mid-range, and all of that. But the main thing is make those high percentage shots. There are times when she gets in a little bit of a slump, like even during the SEC tournament, as good as she was, sometimes she wasn't as efficient as she's been in terms of making the makeable shots, missing the 4-footers of the layups, things like that. Even when they're well contested, she's big and strong enough where you want to see her get the and one now, as opposed to shooting 2 free throws when she's fouled, because she's good enough to power through contact. And so if she continues to improve there and powering through contact, because she's a great free throw shooter as well, knock wood, that you want to see more of the and one as opposed to, all right, let's get two shots at the free throw line.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Joyce is kind of, a lot of players from South Carolina have been, leaning into that, the physical finish, right? We see Fulwiley do it all the time because, a lot of times when you're running, especially in transition, if you can at least, try to draw a foul or at least try to get the bucket, than trying to force a pass over the middle when you've got, people that are streaking down a defender that's, on your potential pass. It's way easier to, go up, try to get a foul, try to get a bucket, than forcing a pass through the middle. So we've seen a lot of South Carolina's players do that in transition. They fuel off of their efforts on the defensive end, and nobody else like Fulwiley at being able to turn a steal into lighting the arena on fire and turning an opposing team's timeout.
Yeah, Fulwiley's fun when she's at her best, which I think she was late in the season. Like in the SEC tournament alone, she averaged, coming off the bench, 13 points, 4 rebounds, nearly 3.5 assists, and more than 2.5 steals per game. Coming off the bench, and those are great start. Those are all conference starting numbers, for a lot of people, and that's what she was doing off the bench in the SEC tournament and shooting it, pretty well. And the key, I think, for her success in the second half of the season and why she was more impactful was her shot selection. You hear Coach talk about that a lot. She doesn't want a lot of shots, especially 3-point shots early in the shot clock, things like that. You want to work for the high percentage shot. I think the difference was getting to the rim more instead of settling for 3-point attempts, because statistically this year, she wasn't a great 3-point shooter, around 25%. And so you don't really like those odds, especially with someone as athletic as she is and how difficult she is to stop off the dribble, not just in transition, but even in the half-court offense. When she decides, you know what, I'm going to hit that gear and go to the rim, there's not a lot of people that can stay with her. And so when she goes to the rim more, one, she can score and she'll get a higher percentage shot. And two, if they are anticipating and they, get some help defense and collapse, she is such an elite passer that someone else who's following in the lane or on the other side is going to get an uncontested layup. So to me, the key for her success is to keep going to the rim.
Yeah, absolutely. She's so quick with the ball in her hands. And again, it's that explosiveness. We've been talking around the media tables. I mean, it's hard to compare her to, a women's player because we haven't really seen it like that before. I mean, there've been comparisons to her coach, again, with that explosive first step. And then again, with the men's game translating over, I see Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, even Allen Iverson, that quick first step to the rim. And then again, as I mentioned, being able to, it gives her that confidence to be able to go up between two defenders and get that lay in, or she also has it in the bag to go behind the back to dump it off. So,
she's just got a great skill set. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Her bag is so deep. She's still finding fries apparently, right? Right. So Full Wiley's one of those players who she really has it all in the bag and likes to pull it out when momentum arises, right? And it lights buildings on fire, and she's going to be clutch amongst all of the other players we've just mentioned. But transitioning into our next point, give me one or two, because again, we've talked about so many different players on the show already. But give me one or two players to watch for South Carolina going into this tournament. I know it's hard because this team is so darn deep.
Yeah, it is hard because there are so many different players that step up in different moments. We've talked about a lot of them. But, I think anytime you're talking about a Coach Stelly team, you got to start with point guard play. And Raven needs to play well. And for, Raven, especially this year, doesn't have to be a scorer. It's the decision making. And when she does shoot, is taking good shots, but and playing good defense. She's an excellent defender. So it's really, picking her spots and, from an offensive standpoint there. And then again, the usual suspects of hitting shots from the perimeter to loosen things up here and there. Pow, has been streaky this year, did not make a lot of shots from 3-point range in the SEC tournament. I think she was just 2 for 11. So, you want to see her keeping defenses honest with hitting some buckets. And then if you get tournament Tessa Johnson, of course, in the postseason last year was remarkable, had 19 points in the national championship game. And she's been a spark plug off the bench. She was terrific in the SEC tournament. I think she averaged nearly 10 points a game in the SEC tournament. Her shooting was very efficient, not just from 3-point range. I think she was 4 for 9 in 3 games, but, she's added to her game of, driving to the basket a little bit this year and getting fouled. And she's a good free throw shooter. So, it's really all of them. South Carolina doesn't depend on one player going into a game. They depend on 9 or 10 to win them the game. And so you really need all of that. You need all of them. And when they're all playing well at the same time, then they're really hard to stop.
Yeah, most definitely. And I feel like when this team has to kind of chase it with 1 or 2 players going off, it takes them a little bit longer to get in the rhythm of leaning on 1 to 2 players. Now, again, they have to lean on them all. Raven and Bree have been fantastic defensively from the guard spot. And honestly, Brad, I mean, for me at least, I think the guards are due, right? We've seen the post play dominate. Eventually, the draw and dump is going to have to come, right? Because the shooting hasn't been as electric from the outside as it normally has been for Dawn Staley's teams. And again, that's just from what I've absorbed, teams challenging them to score in the post. But I don't know. I feel like the guards are due.
Yeah, they are. And, a lot of that comes from, the early in the year or for a lot of the regular season, not consistent scoring in the post. When you don't have to throw, last year when you had Camilla and even in the years with Aaliyah Boston, teams are always throwing a zone at you and daring you to shoot from the outside, right? And that's giving players practice shots. And good players are going to knock down, not contested practice shots. And that's the difference this year. Teams haven't been throwing a lot of zone at South Carolina. And so the guards are shooting more contested shots or having to, shoot off the dribble. So if the post players with, Kitts and Fagan in particular can do what they were doing in the SEC tournament and draw more attention where the defense has to help, then that opens things up for people like Pow and Tessa Johnson and whomever to knock down what should be practice shots for them.
Yeah, Absolutely. Again, Fagan and Kitts have been doing the absolute most in the post to be garnering all the defensive attention. I think it's going to open up. I really do. I'm with you. I think the rotations are going to be late. They just got to swing the ball, right? That's how you beat man to man. Is just rotate it, swing it. Tessa Johnson's again the one player. She stepped up. Her two bigger games of the SEC tournament were obviously the two more important ones. As Tessa does. But so I fully expect her. I mean, maybe not a big outpouring against Tennessee Tech, but man, as the importance ramps up, expect Tessa to get going as well.
Yeah, just knock down the shot, loosen up the defense, and that wears other teams out, because the teams like Tennessee Tech, their starting five are good, but they're only play about six deep. They've got 4 or 5 players that average double figures, but they're not getting scoring off the bench. So you can take a little punch in the mouth if they hit some shots early. But when you bring that second wave in and your second wave can't compete, or you don't have a second wave, you just wear teams down. And that's what South Carolina has done the last few years.
Yeah, most definitely. And, it's going to be a fun ride to watch. Before I get you out of here, Mr. Muller, I always like to, have my guests plug, whatnot. I'm going to throw you this little bone too on with your, exit kind of plugging and whatnot. Are there any upsets you're looking forward to seeing throughout the entire tournament? Again, I know we talked South Carolina's draw is not very, loaded or doesn't pose too much upset alert potential, but out of the entire tournament, do you see any upset alert, going down? Because I know that other side's tricky.
Yeah, it is. And, and again, it's one of those years where I won't be shocked if a 1 seed loses early, because again, the 2s and the 3s this year are good. I don't want to, call anyone in particular out, but I mean, I think every team is vulnerable. I think a lot of people, wouldn't mind seeing another Southern Cal UCLA matchup on the other side, even though there's the number ones. But I'm interested to see if LSU can get healthy, how far they can go. They're a 3 seed in the UCLA bracket. I would love to see that matchup there if LSU got there, just because UCLA, has got so much depth in the bigs, but LSU, when they're healthy, pretty good. But they were down 2 players in the SEC tournament, with Flajay Johnson didn't play, and then Anissa Morrow got hurt in the tournament. So, LSU, if they're not healthy, they could be on upset alert, as a 3 seed. They've got NC State on their side of the bracket. That's a really good team. NC State's the 2 seed. So, that would be tough. A team that I think can do some damage because they've just got some dynamic players. Kentucky, I believe they're a 4 or a 5 seed. They're a lot of fun to. Yeah, they're a lot of fun to watch when they're not playing you. Georgia Amore is a tremendously fun player to watch. So it would be neat to see them make a little bit of a run as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I kind of had Kentucky, and they are a 4 seed. I just looked at it, and then it disappeared. But so I think Southern Cal and Kentucky, Southern Cal being the 1 seed, I think they play a similar style basketball. Georgia Amore versus Juju Watkins would be cinema, considering how much Amore shoots. And then also Clara Strack would also pose some issues for USC. So I think, that's a good matchup there. And also, Brad, I have to do put the pressure on you to see if I can get it out of you to, put the pressure on somebody. I know that other side of the bracket's all loaded up. Chris Wellbaum said, Florida State's the 6th seed that nobody wants to see. So, and because they bring in the nation's leading scorer and everything like that. So everybody seems to have matchup issues but South Carolina, which is, I guess, a good thing. That's the price you pay for not getting the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, it'd be fun to see Vanderbilt make a little bit of a run as well. They're a 7 seed, but with they've got two. They're probably the only team in the country that's got 2 players scoring more than 20 points per game. One of them somehow didn't make all conference. Camille Pierre. I still don't know how that happened. And Blake's, who is the SEC freshman of the year. They're a 7 seed. They could do some damage. They're in South Carolina's side of the bracket. They could potentially see North Carolina a 3 seed. Down the road, and maybe pull off an upset there, because they had a third player that was playing very well in the SEC tournament as well. So you got those 2 20-point scorers plus a third. That's a tough matchup.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt caused South Carolina the most issues at the SEC tournament, in my eyes at least, right? I think, the way that they had to struggle to get back, to push that lead back to where it was, And Blake's coming in, and I think they cut it down to just one there. And again, it's the lowest lead that they had all tournament. And besides, obviously, when they were starting out games and stuff like that. But yeah, it was the lowest lead that they had it brought down to. And they also had to work harder to get that lead back, right? Again, putting it on the shoulders of Chloe Kitts. So I agree. I'd also like to see Vanderbilt make a little run there. It's always fun when Vanderbilt's good at sports, being such an academic university and especially with football beating Alabama. It's fun to see Vanderbilt sports being good. Anybody but the baseball team, I suppose.
There you go. That's exactly what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, Brad Muller, you're the man. I appreciate you joining me as always. Enjoy your tournament run. We will have to get you on afterwards to recap it all. And enjoy your ride.
Joe, I appreciate the time. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that is Brad Muller, the man, the myth, the legend. Yeah, absolutely. Super big thank you to Brad Muller for joining me on this week's episode of The Walkthrough. Again, closing things down, some final thoughts here, and talk about the baseball team real quick before we get out of here. This baseball team, I mean, they had their first SEC series in the Pulmonary era in their grasp, right? It was right there. They had bases loaded, bottom of the eighth. You go up, their pitcher walks in 2 runs, right? So still bases loaded. You go up 2. And then you hit ground ball after ground ball. And then you're out of it, right? Sure, I don't even care that you split the first 2 games, right? What matters is the series clinching games on Sunday. And this baseball team, it was about as big of a coin flip series as you can get. It came down to the absolute wire, and you just didn't convert, right? You're not going to get many easier SEC series than that one, and that's saying a lot for the number 15th ranked team in the country. Oklahoma's a good baseball team, as we saw. But, man, ground ball after ground ball after ground ball that you let go by. Not good for Gamecock baseball. And I'll be sure to have John Whittle in here next week to break down everything last weekend and then also this weekend as Gamecock baseball prepares for yet another series as well. I'm going to hit the other commercials real quick before we get out of here. Appreciate everyone tuning in this week's episode of the Walkthrough. Again, so a little bit more baseball talk on the other side of these ads.
Low on energy? Struggling with inflammation and poor digestion? Try Encapsulate 6 Mushroom Blend and get back in the game. Our blend is specially formulated to promote overall wellness and maximize health benefits using 6 powerful functional mushrooms. Our science-forward approach offers the most potent and bioavailable mushroom supplement on the market, backed by third-party testing to ensure safety and efficacy. Order online on Amazon or encapsulateusa.com today to start your journey to better living. Enter promo code JCM for $10 off.
I said, oh, Lord Jesus, it's a fire.
CryptoProsMidlandsSC.com.
What Right to Bear is we're an association of members across the entire country, and what we offer is we offer legal defense in the event of a self-defense case. Nice. So it's not insurance. So we offer an attorney in the event that one of our members might have some type of an accident. ProtectWithBear.com. We've got all of our social media accounts on the bottom of our website. We've got blogs, articles, detailed description of all of the coverages in depth, and we'd love to have you come check us out and ultimately get the protection you need.
Yeah, once again, shout out to our sponsors of the Walkthrough, Encapsulate, Istro Pros, and as you saw it, Protect with Bear Premium. South Carolina all knotted up with College of Charleston right now in their midweek game College of Charleston, their midweek game over there at Segra Park. Know a bunch of people that were getting after it. Shout out Miss Hopkins doing some work for 1801 Media Co. All knotted up 1-1 after bottom 6. South Carolina hitting. Nobody on, nobody out, to my knowledge. Yeah, nobody on, nobody out. Just started at the bottom of the 6th. South Carolina knotted up with College of Charleston in their midweek. this Gamecock baseball team's they've got a rough road ahead. Got to go travel to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Not an easy place to win by any means, but when you're taking on an Arkansas team that's ranked number 3, woof, man, oh man, is it going to be rough. They've got some good baseball ahead though. Tennessee coming back to Founders Park right after you finish up a midweek in Charlotte with North Carolina. That game always up there, with up there. I can't remember the name of the ballpark. It's driving me nuts, but up there with North Carolina, so that'll be good. But yeah, this baseball team, man. I mean, if you could take one here against College of Charleston in the midweek, boy, would that be good to try to get things back on track. But your schedule certainly doesn't get any easier from here. Tennessee, always a dangerous team. Then you go on to Mississippi State, Texas A&M, who was ranked 1 at one point, but has been sitting. So we'll see. But this weekend certainly not going to be an easy one as you travel on the road to number 3 Arkansas. So yeah, and then again, so if you missed any of this week's episode, be sure to check it out on the Chief Sports Network YouTube channel, or on the Big Spur Twitter, or at the Walkthrough TBS Twitter. Be sure to get all of that. Matt Anderson and Alex Jones will be going live for the late night Gamecocks tomorrow night at 7:30. Be sure to check that out. Also, be sure to check out the Inside the Gamecocks show live every morning from, I believe it's 9. Excuse me if it's not, and it's 10, but live every day. You check that out on the Big Spur Twitter, Inside the Gamecocks Twitter, and the Chief Sports Network YouTube channel. Also in the Chief Sports app, as you could see, the ticker below me has been running this whole time. Now available on the Google Play and Apple App Store, so be sure to tune into that. And last but not least, again, check out the Ernie Bracket Challenge. Again, enter our Inside the Gamecocks / Big Spur All-Gamecocks March Madness Challenge from our partners at Ernie Sports. Win $5,000 cash for the best bracket in the country, plus other team and individual prizes within Gamecock Nation. Go to Ernie.com. That is Ernie.com, and register. It's free. Enter the March Madness Tourney on the homepage and select South Carolina Gamecocks as your team. Fill out the brackets by Thursday and sit back and win. So be sure to go to Ernie.com. Once again, you can find that in the YouTube description below. Or if you're watching us on Twitter, go to the Chief Sports Network YouTube channel. And again, you can find the description for the Ernie Bracket Challenge. Again, go to Ernie.com to enter that, enter to win $5,000 in prizes, and then also a big, Gamecock celebration with, our good friends at the Big Spur and everybody on the Chief Sports Network. So be sure go to Ernie.com, fill that all out. Again, description is below. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're not, go to YouTube, find the description, go to Ernie.com for all of it. So again, appreciate everyone tuning into this tonight's episode of the Walkthrough. Again, if you missed it, go to the Chief Sports app or the Chief Sports Network YouTube channel to find the entire episode. And be sure to get that full interview with Brad Muller. So appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, we'll have full coverage from the NCAA tournament this weekend from Gamecock women's basketball. So stay tuned to the BigSpur.com for all of that. Again, enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the rest of your weekends, and have a great night.